Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Muhannad al-Ubaidi. The reason why I am recording this is to introduce a video that I made. It's a documentary and it gives a rough outline to the history of the Middle East, mainly the history of how nations decline. So I haven't given anything where everything is good. It's decline and the reason for the decline. It isn't a case of navel gazing or self-loathing. It is a case of self-explanation. As Muslims, we tend to lionize our heroes and justify our problems and justify our failings. And this has led time and time again to a decline. Now, currently, the Muslim world is probably at its lowest, where even we have the most sacred of places being ruled by people who are plainly Zionists. The religion is actually being distorted for political reasons. It isn't a case of being an Ikhwani. I'm not an Ikhwani. I do not belong to any Muslim organization, and I do not adhere to the rulings regarding jihad. Jihad is not permissible unless you have a state, and we do not have a state. The reason why we do not have a state is illustrated in this documentary. It's a little bit long. It's just under an hour. So feel free to stop it and then start again. I've actually made this video purely for the sake of education and for the sake of preserving the history, as there are many people who are spending a lot of money to change history and to gloss over failings and turn them into successes where they are actually not. So I hope it is useful, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man ittaba'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawm ad-din wa bi rahmatika ya rabbil alamin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Al-Wahan. The word wahan is an Arabic word that is used for a specific human condition. The condition is weakness in deed and will. It is not natural weakness or weakness that is due to being created so. It is self-afflicted. It is said Allah created him weak or Allah created him strong. Allah the Exalted said in Surah An-Nisa, human was created weak. As for self-afflicted weakness, it is the actions of the weak. It is said he weakened in the matter or becomes weakened. That kind of weakness is always a result of an external factor and never comes naturally. Self-afflicted weakness is a loathsome attribute that we are commanded to avoid. Allah says in Surah Al-Imran, do not weaken and do not feel sorrow as you are in an elevated position. In other words, do not do the deeds of the weak when you are strong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it clear to us that avoiding self-afflicted weakness is a praiseworthy thing, saying, and there are many amongst the prophets and along fought with him religious guys, possessing knowledge and insight, but they never acted weakly due to what afflicted them in the cause of Allah, nor did they weaken or submit, and Allah loves the patient ones. The Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, warned us of the foreseen dangers of depending on and loving worldly matters, and that doing so leads to self-afflicted weakness and humiliation, when he said, the nations will overwhelm you like the hungry attack a feast. Someone asked, will that be due to our small numbers? He replied, on the contrary, you will be many, but you will be like the froth of the seashore. Allah will take away apprehension from the hearts of your enemies and throw wahan in your hearts. Then someone asked, O Messenger of Allah, what is wahan? He then said, the love of this life and hatred of death. Self-afflicted weakness is the reason for the oppression of the nation and its humiliation. It is the reason why resources are pillaged and holy symbols are abused, for it kills the sense of honor and makes the abuse of rights, ownership, and honor seem to be an easy thing to tolerate, and it is the reason for discord amongst leaders and the fall of nations. Ultimately, it displeases Allah and His Messenger. Today, self-afflicted weakness is at its worst for our leaders, fearing things that are much less than death. They fear poverty and loss of power over others. This leads them to oppressing their subjects, and the more they oppress, the more the nation loses self-assurance. This is due put aside the way of Allah in the second or the third order of what is important in life. So the Muslims started to accept the cancellation of obligatory actions that seem to be costly, starting with the obligation of struggling for justice, to the creed of loyalty to the faithful and disowning of the rejecting, until we have stopped practicing the first obligation decreed in Islam, enjoining good and forbidding evil, which was decreed before prayer, fasting, alms, and pilgrimage were decreed. The banning of enjoining good and forbidding evil has put the good-believing Muslim in a direct conflict with corrupt authorities, and the reason for corruption is self-afflicted weakness. The Arab Muslims entered the historical cycle that affected all nations. The self-afflicted weakness of leaders that lead to oppression, and then the self-afflicted weakness of the populace, which leads to the wrath of Allah and general punishment. Despite all the evidence that we received from the Quran and the Sunnah, we ignore the importance of enjoining good and forbidding evil, and stand idly by when our Muslim brothers suffer injustice, until injustice reaches us and it is too late. Allah's Apostle said, if the people see the oppressor and do not take him by his hand, Allah will afflict them with a general punishment from Him. It is said that history repeats itself. In fact, these are the laws of Allah on earth, cosmic laws that do not change. Before the mission of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Arabs were the two kingdoms of Ghasasina and Manadira, and various tribes around them had treaties with one of the two kingdoms. However, in spite of the manpower, economic strength, and urban development from the palaces and monasteries of the Manadira, which were built in the Hiri style, and the Ghasasina's literature, such as Labid ibn Rabi'a and Nabigh al-Dhubnyani and Hassan ibn Thabit, and the castles, the kings of the two kingdoms felt that it was necessary to belong to one of the great powers. Although there was no need for these weak loyalties, the Ghasasina paid tribute to the Romans and the Manadira to the Persians, until the kings of those powerful countries, with brave fighters, agricultural riches, culture, and urbanism, became servants of the kingdoms of Persia and the Romans, although they belonged to the same authentic Arab dynasty, and their lineage meet with their common ancestor Malik ibn Zayd, so the cousins became enemies, each kingdom fighting for its master. Most of the peoples of the two kingdoms believed in the Christian religion. And after the Islamic conquest that witnessed the demolition of the Persian state and the withdrawal of Western Rome and the reduction in the influence of the Romans in the East, the two kingdoms declined, but the people united and the Arabs became one people under the shade of the Islamic Khilafah. The majority of the Manadira who were in southern Iraq became Muslims, while a large number of the Ghasasana remained Christians and lived in Nineveh and the Levant. The leader of the faithful, Umar ibn al-Khattab, said of Arabs, "We are a people that Allah has honored by Islam, and if we seek glory without it, Allah will humiliate us." It has been proven true what Umar said time and again, and we did not learn. The more the Arabs moved away from the principles of Islam, Allah humiliated us and stripped us of primacy and leadership in the nation. Moving away from Islamic principles is the main source of our weakness. In the Umayyad era, the Umayyads followed a nationalist approach that angered non-Arab Muslims, and the Abbasids followed a different approach, as they found themselves not able to run the state without relying on Persian infidels, which led to the fall of the Umayyad state and the establishment of the Abbasi state with an Arab Khalifa and a deep Persian state, where the successors of the Abbasids were only interested in personal worldly matters, abandoning rule by what Allah has revealed and relying on the counsel of the Magi and others, until the Abbasid state ended with the occupation of Baghdad by the Mongols due to the betrayal of Mu'ayyid al-Din al-Asadi al-Baghdadi ibn al-Alqami, a Shia minister. So Holako, the Mongols' leader, entered Baghdad riding side by side with the Shia scholar Nasruddin al-Tusi. After the Abbasid state, the Muslim leadership left the hands of the Arabs. The Ayyubid state was led by Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, who was one of the Iraqi Kurds from Tikrit. And some say the origins of the Ayyubis came from Armenia. Then came the state of the Mamluks, who were from Mongols, Turks, Caucasus, and Turkestan. Then the leadership of the Muslims became in the hands of the Ottoman Turks. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1924, when the Allied countries were victorious against the Axis powers. The Allied countries being Britain and France, and the Axis being Germany and the Ottoman Empire in the First World War in 1918. And the great Arab revolt that was led by Al-Sharif of Mecca, Hussein ibn Ali, with direct support from Britain. And after the victory of the Arabs over the Turks in order to establish a unified Arab state, Britain prevented the Arabs from the union with the support of Sultan Najd Abdul Aziz ibn Saud, who conquered the Hijaz and divided Iraq and Jordan amongst the children of Sharif Hussein. And with that, the hope of a unified Islamic state ended as a result of Arabs seeking pride in nationalism over Islam. And since that era, the Arabs have divided according to the agreement of Mark Sykes, the British High Commissioner for Near Eastern Affairs, and George Picot, the delegate of the French government. Likewise, Lord Balfour promised to the Zionist Rothschild to establish a secular Jewish state in the heart of the Arab world. Palestine was fulfilled. The thrones of the Arab countries were distributed on the basis of non-objection to that ominous promise. In 1948, the establishment of the State of Israel was announced as the beginning of the realization of the Zionist dream of greater State of Israel, which includes what is mentioned in the Torah in Genesis 15 to 18, where the covenant of God is mentioned with Abraham. On that day, God made a covenant with Abram. I will give your offspring the land from the valley of the Nile to the great river, the Euphrates River. Some British Mandate soldiers in Palestine mentioned that while the Zionist gangs were killing, raping, and expelling the Palestinians from their homes, British soldiers would advise the people not to resist. But it was the people's belief that the Arabs were coming to save them. But the Arab leadership were and are still in the employ of the British, the founders of their countries and their guardians of grace. And they did not send a serious force capable of stopping this or the establishment of the state supported by the great powers. Even the rulers who decided to absorb the momentum of anger in the people and the feeling of an Islamic and national duty deceived their people by sending armies armed with old weapons and out-of-date ammunition, and a large number of the brave Arab fighters became the victims of the betrayal of the great military kings and leaders of Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Arabs live in the modern era in the Arab world, which includes 22 countries in West Asia, North Africa, and part of the Horn of Africa. They are all modern states that became important as distinct political entities after the fall and defeat of the Ottoman Empire and its disintegration and its division among the victors of World War I and then World War II. But after the Second World War and the emergence of the Soviet Union as a superpower competing with America, which inherited what it inherited from its allies who were suffering from economic weakness and thus military as a result of expansion beyond their economic ability. The colonial power decided to keep its colonies, using local forces instead of their own manpower. The countries that were under colonialism or the British Mandate declared their independence with the blessing of Britain on the condition that economic relations continue and political leadership under the leadership of those chosen by Britain continues for the countries that were under colonialism or an official mandate. As for those that were not under something official and became founded by the British recently, it remained as it is on the condition of eternal loyalty to the forces of the West. To this day, no one ascends the throne of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia unless approved by the CIA and MI6 and the British Foreign Office. It was easy for the monarchies, the emirates and the sheikhs. As for the countries that were ruled by weak or patriotic monarchs or governments, the colonial countries supported revolution and coups openly at times and secretly other times. In Iraq, a revolution took place that removed the weak king, and the governments went from national governments to communism openly, loyal to the Soviet, to circularism, claiming not to align any party openly, but pro-Western behind the scenes. It also happened in Libya, where the military coup against King Mohammed Idris al-Sanusi, led by the nationalists, took place, headed by Muammar al-Gaddafi, who was sometimes with the Soviets and sometimes with the West. And it is worth noting that King Sanusi is the only Arab ruler who died with no bank accounts in the West or any secret properties. And he is the only king who won a spontaneous public pledge at the end of World War II. Perhaps that was the reason for the coup against him. And in Egypt, the military coup against the weak King Farouk, who apparently took a nationalist form and was loyal to America in secret. As for Syria, which was under France, it was delayed a little until the military coup and Hafez al-Assad assumed the reins of power with a leftist socialist government on the face of it and loyal to the Zionist entity in secret. As for the rest of the Arab world, which was under the control of France, the approach took a similar path with different degrees of concealment of loyalty to the old colonizers. Nevertheless, it must be recognized that absolute monarchy governments were the most successful in terms of political stability, and the existence of the Soviet Union was a safety valve for Arab rulers. Whenever the Arab ruler feels excessive pressure from his master, he will point out that he will turn to the side of the Soviets, and the pressure would be reduced somewhat. We must look at the origins of the political regimes in order to know their true loyalties. It is no secret to anyone that the origins of Arab governments are all the same as the origins of the Zionist entity. We also know that the origins of the Semitic race, the Hebrews, and the Arabs are one, as well as the origin of the Zionist entity and the ruling systems in the Arab world are one, Britain and its Western allies in the world wars. Since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and the West have been playing a game of cat and mouse with the Arabs. We may have heard of the game of cat and mouse. So when the cat is able to catch the mouse, he doesn't eat him immediately. And in many cases, he does not eat him at all, but rather catches him and then lets him run until he feels that he has fled, then pounces on him immediately, and then leaves him again, and the game continues until the mouse dies or the cat becomes bored and kills it. With the Soviet Union, the Arab regimes were able to liberate a little from the chains of their masters, and they imagined that they would be able to liberate. But with the fall of the Soviet Union, international politics became unipolar. The need for courtesy diminished, so the masters became commanding instead of hinting and requesting, and this gradually reflected on the Arab peoples until the peoples revealed their true mettle, and the need for intelligent disinformation ceased to exist. The political regimes took the people into consideration, albeit at face value in some matters and truly in fundamental matters such as religion and sovereignty. But it became apparent to the various regimes that the people were stricken with self-afflicted weakness. So whenever there is a catastrophe that we could not imagine because of the regime's actions, the people would be silent and did not object because of their fear of earthly matters. They would accept the flimsiest arguments to justify the regime's apparent betrayals. Of course, this is something the West realized before the Arabs. The infidel West knows Islam far more than Muslim East, and they understand the words of Allah Almighty. He took his people lightly, and they obeyed him because they were a wrongdoing people. So they knew the story of Pharaoh and knew that the regimes that they established would follow the path of Pharaoh if necessary, because the throne is more important than religion, the homeland, and the people, and the peoples are afflicted with a state of wahan. In 1991, in the same year as the fall of the Soviet Union, the battle to liberate Kuwait took place after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, which took place at the behest of the United States after the economic war that Kuwait launched against Iraq on the advice of the Saudi monarch, who was ordered to do so by the Americans. And despite the fears of the wise amongst the Iraqi people about the invasion of Kuwait, the Iraqi leadership made light of the people because the majority remained silent and those with loud voices were drumming for the leadership. The Muslims in the Gulf also refused the idea of American forces on the land of the two holy sanctuaries to liberate Kuwait. But the royal court drummed up support and religious justification from the court scholars, and the people were silent because the regime made light of the people for their wahan. What followed was accepting a series of frustrating, flimsy, and almost unbelievable arguments justifying American crimes such as the unprovoked bombing of Sudan and Yemen in the 90s, the occupation of Iraq, and the handing over of Iraq to the Persian in 2003, then supporting the Arab Spring to get rid of the previous generation of agents who were judged not capable of the required degree of betrayal, then the order of counter-coups financed by agents who were able to betray with cold hearts and shameless blank faces. Defeat after the defeat is added to the moral defeats until we reach the current situation. What we see today of wahan is not the result of one event or the position of one or two countries. This is a result of international Zionist coordination, where it split governments into two representative factions, a group playing the role of anti-Western and anti-Zionist Muslims, and a group playing the role of moderate Muslims tolerant of the West and the Zionists. In fact, all governments have the same colonial roots. The anti-Western role division is Iran, Turkey, Qatar, and the Muslim Brotherhood, but Iran was given Iraq as a gift from America for the purpose of changing the balance of power in the Middle East and creating a state of fear in the Gulf, which leads to more arms deals with Western companies, and the majority of the companies are under the ownership of Zionist Jews. Historically, it is known that Iran never fired a single bullet against the Zionist occupier, and it played the biggest role in weakening the Arab powers that Israel feared, such as the Iraqi army and the Syrian patriots. And it is no secret to anyone that under Khomeini's rule, Iran bought weapons from Israel to fight Iraq, and Iran has the largest Jewish community in the Middle East outside of occupied Palestine. In addition, they helped America to occupy Afghanistan, according to Mohammad Khatami, the president of Iran at the time. It is worth noting that the Iranian regime was put in place with the help of France after America abandoned the Shah of Iran because they realized that they had taken from the Shah what could be taken and the limit was reached. So they decided to replace their secular servant with a cheaper servant who disguises treason with religion. And it is more effective because he can affect the whole region. As for Turkey, In the heart of Istanbul, there is a Trump Tower, and Turkey's good relationship with America and Turkey's membership in NATO has made the Turkish army the second strongest army in NATO, which means only the American army is stronger than the Turkish army in NATO. As for Qatar, Qatar has the largest US airbase outside of the United States of America. As for the Muslim Brotherhood, they are the oldest organized Islamic movement in modern history. They have activities and acceptance in many Muslim countries, but they have an opportunist approach with those who offer financial support. And the Brotherhood's leadership were all resident in the Gulf the day before the Americans decided that it was time to put a Jew in the Egyptian Republican Palace. Overnight, the Gulf University professors, supported by ruling families, became terrorists and were expelled. Despite the refusal of Western countries to classify them as terrorists, except for Israel, which classifies all Islam as terrorism. The West's reason for rejection was apparently the lack of evidence, but in reality it was to use them as a card against every Muslim ruler who would break loose from the obedience of the White House. Although the stated goals of the Muslim Brotherhood are identical to the sound Islamic doctrine over which the majority of Muslims agree, those who know their religion do not object, but only the Sultan's scholars object. There is no Muslim who does not wish for the existence of a true Islamic state based on the laws of Allah, which deal fairly with both Muslim and non-Muslim, according to the Quran and the Sunnah. But the difference lies in how to reach that goal. Various governments try to deny and mislead people by not imposing Allah's laws and by denying and distorting the interpretation of the authentic hadith. Whoever dies without a pledge of allegiance to a leader on his neck dies the death of Jahiliyyah. But how to reach this goal is disputed. The Muslim Brotherhood's approach is a gradual approach, meaning practically entering non-Islamic systems and trying to gradually change the situation. This is invalid from the beginning because it requires an oath of loyalty to the non-Islamic regime from the beginning and deceit. Whatever is built on falsehood is false. As for practically, it always fails because the non-Islamic regime are on the lookout for any attempts of substantive change, which leads to the group that tries this Machiavellian approach to one of two results. Either the group being exposed and accused of betraying and killed or deported, or the group dissolving due to the weakness people have at the face of the temptations of power. The Brotherhood in Egypt made a mistake when it took part and won the elections that were known to be based on a system that was not set up to achieve Muslims' goals. The late Dr. Morsi should have stepped down from power and not assume the position that was stripped of any real power due to Western pressure on Egypt. Morsi took a position knowing that he did not have the power to order and direct the army or security authorities or public prosecutor. In short, he received the position of an honorary president and a business manager due to his keenness to continue receiving aid from America. And everyone knows what happened. Then the biggest error came when the Brotherhood decided to fall into Iran's arms under the pretext of Iran's assistance to Hamas, the pro-Brotherhood organization that was founded in cahoots with the Zionist entity to diminish the power of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. There is no doubt that the founders of Hamas believe that going along with the Zionists was an incremental, wise step, as if the Zionists were gullible and not masters of deception, treachery, and betrayal. As for the group playing the role of moderate Muslims who tolerate the West and Zionists, their contradictions are even more blatant and shameless, and their deception of their peoples is exposed, except for those with weak minds and flexible principles who benefit from the crumbs of the table of theft and betrayal of the nation. It consists of the quartet of the Emirates, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, led by the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. This group promotes justifications for the submitting to the West and the Zionist entity until we reach normalization of relations with Zionists, being so treacherous and diabolical that they are promoting normalization from the platform of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and established an agreement with Israeli companies to build a Saudi Zionist giant project in Neom. And the most frequent justification is that Iran and Turkish danger is greater than Israeli danger. Yemen was occupied under the pretext of Iran's support of the Shia Houthi group, killing thousands of Yemeni people. But Saudi Arabia supported al-Houthi in the past, and it strengthened the Houthi as a thorn in the side of Yemen's late president Ali Abdullah Saleh to exert control and influence in Yemen. The quartet, led by the United Arab Emirates, boycotted Qatar due to its ties with Iran. But the United Arab Emirates is Iran's largest trading partner in the Middle East, and it has joint maritime protection agreements with Iran, and America has threatened it with money laundering laws because of laundering $20 billion annually of Iranian money to evade economic sanctions imposed by America on Iran, and the United Arab Emirates supported the criminal Hafez al-Assad, the Shiite Nusayri, who is the biggest ally of Iran in the region, and it enabled him to kill and displace half of the Syrian Sunni Muslim population. Saudi Arabia has besieged Qatar due to its relation with Iran and Turkey and prevented Qataris from Hajj and Umrah, while Iranian and Turkish delegation arrive and wander around Mecca and Medina. The U.S. administration also revealed that Saudi Arabia had financed Russia's intervention in Syria to kill the Sunnis there. Also, in a visit of an Iraqi government delegation, the Saudi government agreed to assist the Iraqis with $3 billion to pay the salaries of the sectarian Shia militias, which are loyal to Iran, who do not hide the fact that they exterminated 1 million Sunni Iraqi citizens and that their goal is to expel all Sunnis from Iraq. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia met the Iraqi delegation headed by a leader of the Popular Mobilization Forces who had previously stated that he intended to liberate Mecca and Medina from the Nawasib Wahhabis, and the delegation were honored to enter the Kaaba. As for Egypt, it is the role of Sisi, the president of Egypt, who turned against the Brotherhood's Morsi a few months after he was sworn in to fulfill the constitution and serve the Egyptian president, is to represent international Zionism among the Arabs and gain Emirati and Saudi financial support. He has a mediation role between Arabs and the Jews because of his closeness to the Jews, as he was born a Jew, as his mother, Malika Titani, is a Moroccan Jewess, and Judaic law states that the mother's religion is the one that is followed by the children, and Jewishness is inherited maternally. In addition to his role in milking resources from the gullible Gulf states and the sale of state strategic resources in order to permanently weaken Egypt, he has sold 2 islands of Egyptian territory to Saudi Arabia and sold the Nile to Ethiopia. And the fourth of the Arab quartet is the Arab patriot-claiming Zionist-leaning Kingdom of Bahrain, whose role is limited to applauding the 3 big boys, claiming that they are dealing logically and realistically in support of everything that the Emir of Abu Dhabi orders, or rather the advisor to the Emir, Mossad's leading man in the Middle East, Mohammed Dahlan, the Palestinian expelled from Fatah, and the top suspect in the murder of the late Palestine Liberation Organization chairman Yasser Arafat. May Allah have mercy on him. As alleged by President Mahmoud Abbas, president of the Palestinian authorities, who accused Dahlan of assassinating Yasser Arafat on November the 11th, 2004, after the announcement of the Palestinian Authorities' investigation into the death of Arafat, which was issued on the 13th of March, 2013. Due to fear of Iranian influence. But there is nothing wrong with relations, as they are very friendly with Iran, and the daily flights that take place from Manama Airport, taking Saudis and Bahraini Shiite visitors to Najaf, where they perform rituals of cursing and insulting the symbols of the Sunnis and the symbols of the Arabs, adopting slogans of liberating the 2 holy mosques from Al Saud and the destruction of Sunni states as a core belief. These apparent contradictions indicate that all seemingly warring parties are working together to achieve a unified goal, which is Western strategic, commercial, and military hegemony over the region in exchange for the regimes remaining on the thrones. This is not strange, as the roots of the system are one, and the same political movements and the systematic changes of people culture is also systematic. Religion is the opium of the masses, said Karl Marx, the founder of communist ideology, who was of Jewish origin. He may be right about religions that are homogeneous in terms of ethnicity and region, but the Islamic religion is the liberation of people, because it calls for social and economic justice, which is not elitist and divisive. It is comprehensive to humanity. Islam has caused insomnia for authoritarian regimes since the establishment of the first Islamic State, because the state is based on a constitution that is derived from the Holy Book and Sunnah without deficiency and distortion, giving the Muslim and the non-Muslim citizen in the state full rights, and no other political system can compete with the laws of Allah, which is based on social justice, economic wisdom beyond all economic systems. Therefore, the opposing regimes distort the reputation of Islam and prevent the application of Islam once and the practice of Islam in other instances, because they are aware that Islam, if practiced properly, as it was, especially in the period of the 4 rightly guided Khalifas, in particular the first 2 Khalifas, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar ibn al-Khattab, is a superior system of governments. The apprehensiveness of Islam was evident in the West since the beginning of the industrial renaissance in the 18th and 19th century in Europe. The political regimes exploited the Crusader sensibilities and the feelings of superiority towards the Arabs and Muslims among their people. But from the mid-20th century, the political parties began to tarnish the image of Islam differently by implying to their people that Islam is a backward and harsh religion, putting humanitarian dialogue as an excuse for hostility to any people who prefer to live under the laws of Allah. While encouraging Arab regimes to take nationalistic positions, sometimes supported of pan-Arabism, and Islamic position on other occasions, according to the interests of the West. Until the fall of the Soviet Union, all the forces who were against the people took one direction over the past 30 years. After the liberation of Afghanistan from the Soviets by Mujahideen of the various organizations that were supported by all Arab states, jihad was criminalized and made haram. And the title of heroes who fought the Soviets to liberate the Afghan Muslim people changed to terrorist criminal overnight. Of course, the first to sing that melody were the Gulf states. As for the people, they are divided into three groups. Those who support the rulers unquestioningly, those who are oppressed and silent, and the few opposing activists. The supporters are divided into three sections. The first section are the beneficiaries who benefit directly, such as holders of high-level positions and relationship with direct economic relations to the rulers. The second section are the drum beaters who are motivated employees who have made a career of drumming in the media, on radio and satellite channels, and so-called political analysts who come up with justifications that become more and more outlandish as the ruler's treason becomes more and more apparent. And the promoters of social media sites such as Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, and sometimes TikTok. The third section are volunteers, hoping to get promoted to second place with a dream of change in their economic situation or a gift from an official. And finally, volunteer sycophants whose personalities need a sense of belonging to a winning group. In fact, the sycophants make up the most popular group on the social networking sites and in organized government demonstrations in the past. They are the most dangerous category of society because they influence the silent majority and support the illusion that change is impossible and that opposition or criticism is something strange and weird. And I say with regret that the silent majority tend to follow sycophants more than opposition because it's easier. There is a noticeable weakness in the courage and principle of the Arab peoples in particular. There are no people more prepared to spontaneous clap and chant for a ruler as much as the Arab peoples. This is not new, but since pre-Islamic era, the Almighty said, "And as for the poets, the deviators follow them. Do you not see how they ramble in every valley and how they say what they do not do?" As Islamic awareness and knowledge decreases, the importance of Islam in the Arab societies declines, and the Arabs return to the tribal ignorance which can be deployed to control a nation. Influential forces have focused on public opinion through various media platforms on the revival of tribalism amongst the Arab people. It is the view of the rulers propaganda machine, be it to drum beaters or electronic flyers whose job is to support the drummers, and the sycophants who support them, that anyone who objects to the Western Zionist plan is a non-Arab and is not entitled to intervene with an opinion. They even go as far as to the point of denying the existence of the Palestinian people as an Arab people and denying the Islam of non-Arab peoples. The regime employ historians and journalists who were once well thought of to try to deny the role of non-Arab peoples, especially the Turks, after the Turkish government refused to hide the Khashoggi murder. If it was not for the Western historical resources available in libraries in London, Paris, and the Vatican, those hostile to the Ottomans would have changed history, and history would have been lost. These poor excuses of men have tried to change history. It is the epitome of villainy and immorality that a historian would use his or her doctorate to falsify history, and the higher one gets in fame and government and favor, the lower he gets as a man and a human being. We saw this with our own eyes in the series called Al Osmanli, which aired on satellite channel funded by Saudi Arabia and Western Zionists, and presented by a so-called Dr. Sultan al-Lasqa. We also saw the Saudi liberal activist Suad al-Shamari flirting with a boy who is of her son's age on Zionist TV, while the honorable tribesmen of Shammar silently grit their teeth. The Saudi Entertainment Authority also played a role after the disbandment of the Authority of Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice in Saudi Arabia, in trying to change the Saudi and Gulf society from Islamic conservative to a dissolved secular society by opening movie theaters and staging festivals throughout the year, similar to the festivals that Roman emperors used to stage. Roman festivals were over a period of 180 days in the year, with sports and artistic events. Some of them were violent and other debauched, thus distracting the people from the real deterioration of the state economically and militarily. Events in Roman times, such as wrestling, ferocious animals, and chariot racing, and wild naked dance. As for the Jeddah and Riyadh festivals, women and men wrestle, and music bands promote homosexuality. And the rapper Lil Wayne, who insisted on introducing drugs into Saudi lands, and when he was refused, he disembarked his private plane until he was placated by the crown prince of the kingdom with a brand new Lamborghini. From the people's money, of course. And, of course, we can't forget the camel races. All clerics who criticize these practices, which are considered a disnuance on the land of the two holy mosques, were arrested, and other scholars were arrested on charges such as affiliation or sympathy with the Muslim Brotherhood. They arrested others on the charge of sympathizing with Qatar, and now the charges have reached the allegation of not praying for the crown prince enough. All this is in preparation for normalization with Israel. As for the United Arab Emirates, there was no need for preparation because the United Arab Emirates was established as a tourist resort, and there is no need for much change. As for Bahrain, since the Second World War, it was nothing but the town of bars and brothels for the non-religious Saudis who wish to drink alcohol and fornicate without legal accountability to which they may be exposed to at home, and the social shame that follows with a conservative Muslim society. Now the Emirati and Bahraini normalization has been announced, and Donald Trump, the American president, has confirmed that Saudi Arabia will normalize with Israel if he wins the election. As for the regimes that were established by the same founder as the Zionist entity, they have nothing else to do to keep their thrones but to oppress and brutalize the people more and more until the prophecy of Theodor Herzl, the founder of World Zionism, is fulfilled. He said, "We will appoint over them the dregs of their people until the day comes when the Arab people will welcome the Israeli Defense Force with roses and pleasant-smelling flowers." Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.